Throughout history, humanity has always yearned for freedom, considering it the pinnacle of personal and societal development. But does freedom truly bring happiness, or is it also a source of anxiety and fear? This is the question that the renowned psychologist and philosopher Erich Fromm posed in his book, The Fear of Freedom. First published in 1941, this book analyzes one of the deepest issues in human psychology: the relationship between individual freedom and the insecurity it can cause. Or, why, when modern society offers more freedom, do people feel lonely, lost, and more susceptible to extreme ideologies? Fromm argues that it is precisely within unlimited freedom that people confront the fear of isolation, insecurity, and the struggle to find meaning in life. In this video, we will explore the key concepts that Fromm presented. From the mechanisms of escape, where people seek to escape the burden of freedom through submission and conformity, to the psychological analysis of political movements like fascism. We will also delve into the connection between freedom, democracy, and modern society, to better understand why humans both long for and fear freedom. Let's embark on this journey to explore this profound book, to not only gain a deeper understanding of ourselves, but also of the society in which we live. Freedom, a psychological problem? The first part of the book focuses on exploring the profound meaning of the concept of freedom in human psychology. Erich Fromm begins by asking, what does freedom truly mean for modern humanity? Is freedom merely a positive ideal, or is it also a source of the emotional and psychological difficulties that we often fail to fully recognize? According to Fromm, freedom is not simply the escape from external constraints, such as political or social oppression. It is also the ability to develop oneself, to become an independent individual, with free thought and action. Throughout history, people have fought to gain these freedoms, from the Reformation to various political revolutions. However, Fromm emphasizes that freedom is not just a pleasant concept. It carries profound psychological consequences, especially when individual freedom conflicts with the need for a sense of safety and belonging in society. One of the core points that Fromm presents is the internal conflict within individuals when facing freedom. Although freedom is a noble ideal, it also comes with feelings of loneliness and responsibility. When individuals are free to choose, they must confront countless decisions and the consequences of those decisions. Freedom can make people feel anxious and uneasy as they lose the social structures and systems that previously provided them with stability and direction. This is the reason Fromm refers to it as the fear of freedom. Fromm also presents an important reality. When people feel overwhelmed by freedom, they tend to seek forms of escape from it. Instead of enjoying and utilizing freedom for personal development, many choose to revert to familiar binding structures where they feel safer. Submission to or adherence to authoritarian ideologies or political movements is a prime example of this. People turn to external forms of control and imposition to alleviate the fear that arises when confronting freedom. Another important aspect that Fromm addresses in this chapter is the conflict between individual freedom and the need to belong to a community. According to Fromm, in the past, traditional social structures such as family, religion, and political systems played a clear role in defining each individual's position and duties in society. This provided people with a sense of security and meaning, helping them avoid feelings of isolation and alienation. However, with the emergence of personal freedom in modern times, these structures have been disrupted, and individuals must shape their own meanings and values. Freedom offers opportunities for creativity, development, and innovation, but it also forces individuals to face a harsh reality. Without guidance from traditional structures, they must take full responsibility for their decisions and their consequences. It is this conflict between the desire for freedom and the need to belong to a community that creates the psychological issues individuals must confront. Fromm explains that people often feel torn between two choices. On one side is personal freedom with its responsibilities and insecurities, and on the other is safety and stability through submission to external powers. For many, submission becomes the easier choice when they no longer have to bear the pressure of making decisions for themselves. Ultimately, Fromm advocates that to address this psychological issue, individuals need to learn how to live with freedom actively and consciously. Instead of escaping from freedom, we should strive for a positive form of freedom, where individuals can develop holistically and be aware of their responsibilities towards society. The emergence of the individual and the dual nature of freedom. Erich Fromm focuses on exploring the development of the individual within the context of society, history, and psychology, while analyzing the internal contradictions of freedom. Fromm begins by tracing the development of the individual in Western society, particularly from the Middle Ages to the Renaissance and Reformation. In the Middle Ages, individuals did not exist in the sense we understand today. People primarily lived within tightly structured communities, each person having a clear role in the collective system, such as village, church, or family. During this time, stability and social cohesion provided a sense of safety and clear direction for individuals. However, as these structures began to dissolve with the emergence of individualism during the Renaissance and Reformation, people began to self-identify as independent individuals. This marked a significant psychological advancement, but also introduced a novel anxiety, as individuals had to confront choices and responsibilities on their own. According to Fromm, freedom has an internal contradiction. On one hand, it is a prerequisite for individual development and creativity. On the other hand, freedom also brings feelings of insecurity, loneliness, and disorientation. When a person becomes independent from traditional social constraints, they have the opportunity to grow, but they also face new pressures: isolation, a sense of aimlessness, and the fear of not knowing what to do with this freedom. Fromm distinguishes between two types of independence: positive independence and negative independence. Positive independence occurs when individuals can shape their own lives, develop themselves, and be creative. However, when individuals do not know how to confront freedom, this independence becomes negative, leading to feelings of isolation and insecurity. Without traditional social constraints to rely on, individuals may feel lost in a world without clear rules and norms. Fromm argues that this isolation is one of the main reasons many people reject personal freedom and seek to return to older forms of constraint, such as submission to the power of authoritarian ideologies or adherence to extremist political systems. Among friends, Fromm emphasizes that freedom is not just a blessing, it also comes with heavy responsibilities. When individuals are free, they must make their own decisions, face the consequences, and construct meaning for their lives. This can cause significant anxiety, as not everyone is willing or capable of confronting these responsibilities. This is the dual nature of freedom that Fromm wants to highlight. Freedom is essential for personal development, but it can also lead individuals into states of insecurity and confusion, if not properly managed. Fromm suggests that this dual nature of freedom is particularly evident in modern society. As traditional social systems such as family, religion, and community structures gradually disintegrate, individuals become freer, but also face greater feelings of isolation. With the rise of capitalism and globalization, individuals are increasingly pressured to shape their own lives in a world without clear structures to rely on. In modern society, Fromm emphasizes that many people do not genuinely achieve personal freedom. Instead, they seek forms of escape. Rather than using freedom for personal development, they turn to ideologies or collective movements to find safety and avoid the burdens of freedom. Freedom during the Reformation. Erich Fromm focuses on a significant period in European history, the Reformation, and explores how religious, social, and psychological changes influence the concept of personal freedom. Fromm argues that the Reformation was not only a religious revolution, but also a turning point in humanity's quest for understanding its own freedom. The Reformation took place in the 16th century when figures like Martin Luther and John Calvin challenged the power of the Roman Catholic Church and introduced new forms of religion, such as Protestantism. This movement stemmed from dissatisfaction with the traditional religious and social systems that controlled people's lives through rigid regulations and absolute obedience. The disintegration of old religious structures opened a new phase, where individuals began to seek meaning in their lives and question their roles in the world. Fromm posits that the Reformation involved not just changes in worship practices, but also fundamental questions about freedom and personal responsibility. When individuals were no longer bound by the strict rules of the Church, they were granted personal freedom to make decisions and shape their own lives. However, this also brought about anxiety and fear, as they had to confront the loss of familiar collective norms. Fromm emphasizes that a core element of the Reformation was the shift from worshiping God through collective rituals to a more personal and direct relationship with Him. This represented a significant change in the concept of religious freedom. In the medieval religious system, individuals were protected and guided by the Church. They only needed to adhere to regulations and rituals without facing their own spiritual responsibilities directly. However, the Reformation changed this by emphasizing personalization in one's relationship with God. Martin Luther, a leading figure in the Reformation, believed that each individual should access God through the Bible without the Church's intervention. This meant that people became freer in their religious beliefs, but also had to bear direct responsibility for their faith and actions. Fromm argues that this freedom is not entirely pleasant for individuals. Instead of feeling liberated, many faced fears due to the absence of any authority to rely on. This leads them to easily fall into a state of anxiety and seek new forms of escape from unwanted freedom. Fromm also analyzes the thoughts of John Calvin, a prominent figure in the Reformation. Calvin developed a strict theory of predestination, asserting that only a select few were chosen by God for salvation while the majority would be condemned. Fromm contends that this idea creates a profound contradiction. While the Reformation promised personal freedom, Calvin's doctrine of predestination is linked to feelings of powerlessness and despair. Individuals cannot be truly free if they believe their fate is predetermined and unchangeable. Calvin's theory exemplifies how people, when faced with absolute freedom, seek to limit it through binding ideologies. Fromm notes that many people fear freedom to the extent that they accept new limits and control systems to escape the burden of personal responsibility. The Reformation created a strong opposition between two aspects of freedom. On one hand, individual freedom in religion and society. On the other hand, the need for submission to alleviate fear and anxiety. Fromm points out that many individuals during the Reformation, despite gaining religious freedom from the Catholic Church, sought other systems to limit this freedom. One such system was strict moral submission and rigid religious regulations from Protestant sects. This highlights a contradiction within humanity. When freed from traditional constraints, individuals seek new constraints to mitigate their feelings of anxiety. Fromm calls this the escape mechanism, the human tendency to escape the burden of freedom by submitting to a new system, whether it be religious, political, or cultural. Fromm concludes that the Reformation not only influenced religion, but also shaped how modern individuals understand and experience freedom. The breakdown of collective religious structures provided individuals with significant freedom, but it also made them feel isolated and unsupported in the world. The Reformation ushered in a new era where individuals had to confront the responsibilities of freedom without the protection of the Church or traditional society. This leads to a common phenomenon in modern society. Many people, when faced with excessive freedom, seek to limit it through new forms of submission. From extreme ideological systems to authoritarian religious or political forms, individuals tend to revert to binding structures when they feel insecure in their freedom. Two aspects of freedom for modern humans. Erich Fromm focuses on analyzing two different dimensions of freedom in the context of modern society. Fromm argues that freedom provides individuals with the opportunity for self-development, but also creates significant psychological challenges, leading them to a state of insecurity and isolation. He divides freedom into two main aspects: negative freedom and positive freedom. Negative freedom, liberation from constraints. The first aspect of freedom that Fromm discusses is negative freedom, freedom from, also known as liberation from traditional constraints and power. Testament. This is the type of freedom that individuals achieve when they break away from rigid social structures, religious systems, feudal relations, and forms of control by large organizations. This liberation marks a significant step in the historical development of humanity, especially since the Renaissance, Reformation, and Industrial Revolution, when individuals began to seek autonomy and were no longer bound by imposed traditions. In modern society, negative freedom is evident in people's rights to choose their jobs, places of residence, religious beliefs, and political views without pressure from old power systems. This means that individuals can determine their own lives and relationships, no longer having to adhere to the rigid norms of traditional society. However, Fromm argues that negative freedom is not just liberation, but also brings serious psychological issues. When individuals break away from external constraints, they also lose the sense of stability and belonging to a community. This loss causes individuals to fall into a state of isolation, disorientation, and lack of clear support. Negative freedom, while offering liberation, can also lead to feelings of insecurity, leaving many people feeling empty and lacking purpose. Positive freedom. The freedom to develop. The second aspect of freedom that Fromm emphasizes is positive freedom. Freedom to, or the freedom to act, create, and develop oneself. This is a constructive type of freedom that allows individuals not only to escape constraints, but also to explore their potential and create new values for life. Positive freedom is the freedom that individuals use to build a meaningful life through active participation in social, cultural, and personal development activities. According to Fromm, positive freedom is not only about choosing or escaping from things one dislikes, but also about the ability to consciously shape one's own life. This is the freedom that individuals use to develop their values, perspectives, and life goals. It enables individuals to become creative, responsible, and self-sufficient. Positive freedom is also linked to the ability of individuals to love, collaborate with others, and contribute to the community without being dependent on imposed social structures. The balance between two types of freedom. Fromm argues that modern individuals often struggle to balance negative freedom and positive freedom. While many have achieved negative freedom, meaning they have escaped the control and constraints of old organizations or power systems, they may be unable to use this freedom positively to develop themselves. Instead of becoming autonomous and creative, they fall into a state of isolation and seek new forms of constraints to fill that void. Fromm refers to this state as escaping from freedom. Individuals cannot bear the solitude and responsibility of freedom, so they seek to return to controlling systems such as totalitarianism, extreme ideologies, or endless consumerism. This is a way for individuals to escape the burdens of freedom and seek safety in new control structures. Fromm emphasizes that only when individuals know how to use negative freedom to develop positive freedom can they truly achieve comprehensive freedom. This requires individuals to be aware of their responsibilities in building their lives and communities, rather than seeking easy solutions by submitting to or relinquishing their freedom. Freedom and fear in modern society. Fromm explains that in modern society, many people feel fear toward freedom because it brings psychological burdens. When no longer bound by old social or religious rules, individuals must make decisions for themselves and take responsibility for their choices. This fear makes modern individuals prone to confusion, isolation, and susceptibility to extreme ideologies or authoritarian political movements. However, Fromm also believes that true freedom, if used correctly, will provide individuals with the ability to develop and become happy. Positive freedom, focused on creativity, love, and cooperation, is the key for individuals to overcome fear and achieve balance in life. The mechanisms of escape. Erich Fromm focuses on explaining the ways in which modern humans use to escape the burdens of freedom. Fromm argues that while freedom is a great achievement for humanity, it also brings significant psychological challenges. When individuals are liberated from traditional systems of control, they face loneliness, anxiety, and a sense of lack of belonging. To cope with these negative emotions, Fromm suggests that many people turn to mechanisms to escape freedom. On Fromm's escape freedom, he analyzes three main mechanisms that people often use to escape from the loneliness and responsibilities that freedom entails. Automaton conformity. One of the most common escape mechanisms is automaton conformity. People often seek safety and stability by conforming themselves to social or cultural groups. They relinquish their individuality and independence to adhere to the values, norms, and behaviors that society expects. According to Fromm, many people in modern society choose to live a patterned life, doing what they believe others expect, rather than pursuing their own true values and meanings. Although this provides them with temporary safety, it causes them to lose their personal essence and autonomy. Ultimately, they become standardized individuals, living a life devoid of true meaning, simply to avoid feelings of loneliness and alienation. Destructiveness. The second escape mechanism discussed by Fromm is destructiveness. When individuals cannot face the anxiety and emptiness of freedom, they may resort to destructive behavior, attempting to annihilate or harm those things that make them feel powerless or out of control. Destructiveness can manifest in many forms, from personal violence to social acts of destruction such as war, conflict, and unrest. From Fromm's perspective, individuals turn to destruction when they feel threatened by their own freedom, and instead of building or creating, they seek to destroy what they cannot control. This applies not only to individuals, but also to society as a whole. When a society feels unstable and unsafe, it can become destructive, choosing the path of violence and oppression to maintain power and control. Authoritarianism. The third escape mechanism, and one of the most common methods, is authoritarianism. This is the form in which an individual relinquishes their freedom to depend on the power of others or a system of authority. Fromm argues that in a society where freedom and responsibility become overwhelming, individuals may choose to submit to a powerful authority to alleviate feelings of anxiety and insecurity. They turn to strong leaders, organizations, or authoritarian ideologies, sacrificing their personal freedom in exchange for a sense of safety and external control. Authoritarianism can manifest not only in political forms, but also in personal relationships, where one person becomes entirely dependent on another to feel secure. These individuals often feel too weak or unable to endure the burden of freedom, so they seek to rely on an external power to decide for them. The consequences of escape mechanisms. Fromm contends that these three mechanisms are ways individuals use to escape the burden of freedom. Although each method seems different, they all share the common goal of alleviating feelings of anxiety and loneliness brought about by freedom. However, these escape mechanisms are not positive solutions. They often lead to negative consequences for individuals and society. Automaton conformity results in the loss of personality and individual creativity, leading people to live lives devoid of true meaning. Destructiveness causes acts of violence and destruction, harming both individuals and communities. Meanwhile, authoritarianism leads to the degradation of freedom and the development of oppressive systems, as individuals are willing to relinquish their self-determination in exchange for temporary safety. Solutions to the problem of freedom. Fromm argues that rather than fleeing from freedom, individuals should learn to face it and use it positively to develop themselves. This includes accepting personal responsibility and seeking true freedom through love, creativity, and healthy social relationships. Freedom should not be seen as a burden, but rather as an opportunity for comprehensive personal and social development. The psychology of fascism. Erich Fromm provides a profound analysis of the socio-psychological factors that contributed to the rise of fascism in German society in the 20th century. Fromm does not only focus on political and economic causes, but also emphasizes the deeper psychological reasons that led many German citizens to support and follow this authoritarian and brutal ideology. From a social psychology perspective, Fromm argues that fascism is not merely the result of political manipulation, but also a psychological response of individuals who feel powerless, fearful of loneliness, and directionless in the modern world. These feelings drive many to extreme ideologies in search of security and control in their lives. Fromm points out that fascism thrives on three main psychological factors: submission to power, destructiveness, and the emergence of a sense of superiority. Submission to power and the desire for control. According to Fromm, one of the main psychological motivations that leads individuals into fascism is submission to power. Individuals who feel powerless and lost in modern society often seek protection and safety by submitting to strong leaders. In the case of pre-World War II Germany, many citizens chose to follow Adolf Hitler and the fascist regime as a way to overcome fear and insecurity caused by economic crisis, unemployment, and the collapse of traditional social structures. Quote, Spot. This submission is not merely blind obedience to commands, but also a relinquishment of personal responsibility. By entrusting decisions and responsibility to a dictatorial leader, people evade the burden of having to make decisions themselves and confront the complexities of freedom. This creates an illusion of strength and power for both the leader and the followers, as they feel they are part of an invincible force. Destructiveness and the tendency for violence. The second psychological factor Fromm addresses is destructiveness, particularly in the context of war and conflict. Fascism not only promises safety, but also stimulates human instincts for destruction. Individuals who feel dissatisfied, frustrated, or oppressed in life often tend to vent their anger through violence and destruction. Fascism has exploited this tendency by creating common enemies, such as Jews, Romani people, and other minority groups, to unite and legitimize acts of cruelty and violence against them. This destructiveness serves not only as psychological relief, but also as a means by which fascism maintains power and control. Focusing on a common enemy helps the German populace feel united and have a shared goal, while simultaneously avoiding confronting their internal societal issues. Fascism provides an easy outlet for frustration and disappointment, nurturing violence and hostility. Sense of superiority and personal elevation. The final psychological factor Fromm analyzes is the sense of superiority that fascism offers its followers. Fascism attracts individuals not only through submission and violence, but also by awakening feelings of pride and superiority. Hitler propagated the idea of the Aryan master race, instilling a sense of superiority in the German people and making them feel special and more powerful than other nations. For many, belonging to a group deemed superior allows them to feel confident and significant in a world where they once felt anonymous and weak. This is how fascism fosters loyalty, by enhancing individual self-esteem, transforming them into part of a noble national and racial ideal. However, this sense of superiority is merely an illusory elevation. In reality, it masks the deep insecurities and lack of self-confidence of those adhering to fascist ideology. By attacking and oppressing others, they feel a sense of power and control, yet psychologically, they continue to evade the truth of their own weaknesses and dependencies. Fascism and the fear of freedom. Fromm emphasizes that one of the main reasons fascism can spread and attract many people is due to the fear of freedom. In modern society, freedom brings not only liberation but also significant pressure concerning personal responsibility. When individuals are no longer bound by traditional social and religious systems, they must face the task of self-determining their lives. This can lead to feelings of loneliness, anxiety, and helplessness, emotions that fascism has effectively exploited. Fascism offers a solution to the fear of freedom by creating authoritarian and oppressive power systems. Those who follow fascism relinquish their freedom to submit to authority and join a strictly disciplined community. While this helps them escape the worries of personal responsibility, it also results in them becoming victims of a brutal and inhumane power system. Freedom and democracy. Erich Fromm focuses on the relationship between freedom and democratic political systems, particularly how individual freedom can be realized and protected in a democratic society. Fromm raises important questions about how modern individuals confront freedom in the context of democracy, and whether democratic systems truly provide people with the ability to practice freedom. Fromm argues that democracy, in its ideal form, is a political system designed to ensure and expand individual freedom. However, he also points out the challenges modern democracy faces, especially as society becomes increasingly complex and invisible power mechanisms, such as economic conglomerates or mass media, can threaten individual freedom. Here are some key points that Fromm explores in this chapter. Democracy and political freedom. In a democracy, Fromm points out that individuals have the right to participate in political decisions and the freedom to express opinions. However, he also acknowledges that many people in modern society feel alienated from this process and do not truly control the political decisions that affect their lives. This leads to feelings of helplessness and frustration, even though, theoretically, democracy is a system that allows people to exercise their political freedom. Fromm emphasizes that if democracy exists merely in form, without actually allowing people to have real power, then freedom will become an empty concept. A democratic society must not only protect the right to free speech and voting, but also create opportunities for people to actively and meaningfully participate in community and national decisions, economic freedom, and social inequality. One of the issues Fromm identifies in modern democracies is economic inequality. While a society may guarantee political freedom, if economic freedoms are not protected or fairly distributed, individuals will still struggle to realize their true freedoms. Fromm argues that the concentration of economic power in the hands of a few can create inequality, weakening the freedom of the majority of the population. According to Fromm, for a democracy to truly provide freedom, it needs to address the issue of resource and opportunity distribution more equitably. Economic inequality is not just a financial problem, but also a psychological factor that makes people feel unfree and unable to control their lives. Freedom and social pressure. Fromm also analyzes how modern democratic societies create invisible pressures on individuals. In a society called free, people can still be bound by social conventions and cultural expectations that they do not recognize. These conventions may include the necessity to pursue material success, conform to acceptable behavioral patterns, or pressure from media and advertising. Even in a democratic society, individuals may feel they have lost their freedom due to adhering to social norms that they did not choose. Fromm refers to this phenomenon as escape from freedom. People abandon their personal freedoms to conform to societal standards for fear of isolation or alienation. This illustrates that freedom in democracy is not solely a political or economic issue. It also relates to psychology and how individuals interact with society. Democracy and true freedom. Fromm asserts that true freedom is not just the right to choose or express opinions, but the ability to self-awareness and self-development within a society. An ideal democracy not only allows individuals to express their views, but also encourages them to develop their potential, explore their identities, and live autonomously. He argues that personal freedom is only genuinely realized when individuals can live according to their values, rather than merely conforming to societal rules or expectations. Freedom requires a level of self-awareness and the ability to make decisions based on personal values and beliefs, rather than being influenced by social pressures or political and economic power. Democracy and personal responsibility. In this chapter, Fromm also discusses personal responsibility in protecting and developing democracy. He emphasizes that democracy cannot exist if people are not aware of their responsibilities to participate and uphold the values of freedom. Freedom is not something that society can passively grant to individuals. Rather, each person needs to actively protect and practice their freedom through participation in social and political activities. In today's video, we explored Erich Fromm's profound perspectives on freedom in his book, The Fear of Freedom. The author goes beyond simply defining freedom as a political right. He delves into the challenges modern individuals face in practicing freedom. Fromm points out that freedom is not merely the right to choose, but also the ability to self-awareness and personal development. He emphasizes that to achieve true freedom, each person must actively participate in building and protecting democratic values, as well as be clearly aware of their responsibilities. This is particularly important in the context of modern society, where pressures from social norms and economic inequality can make us feel alienated and out of control. From Fromm's analyses, we can recognize that freedom is a journey, not just a destination. We need to find our way to become autonomous individuals, capable of living according to our own values, while also encouraging others to do the same. True freedom is when each individual can live and develop freely, not only for their own benefit, but also for the collective progress of society. I hope this video has provided you with deeper insights into the importance of freedom and how we can practice it in our daily lives. If you found this content interesting and helpful, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments section. What do you think about the perspectives Fromm presented? How can you apply these ideas in your life? Thank you for watching, and see you in the next videos.